about me. Azul means blue in Spanish, which is an interesting name to name a child. My mom actually named me Blue. It's after a cowboy on a TV called High Chaparral. And my dad is Mexican and thought, there's no way you're naming a kid Blue. She's never called me Azul once. But this is the name that I have. And I find it very interesting that in a name, there's something special or something horrific. Being called Blue your whole life is challenging. Being called Azul is also challenging. But what's really interesting, I've been called a lot of things. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But one of the things that happens is I became a teacher during a downturn, which you can probably understand. You have to pivot. But I was a principal of a school, many schools, a professor, and a teacher for 25 years. And I learned so much during that time, but mainly I learned about what it is to be a coach to young people. And I want to tell you that writing a book changed my life. But many people who want to write a book think about it, but never do. The New York Times said that 81% of North Americans say they have a book inside of them. But only 3% ever take action to finish their manuscript. And of that 3% who actually finish the manuscript, get it out of the hard drive or put it somewhere, ever hit publish. 30% of that 3% ever hit publish. So we're talking about a fraction of 1% ever actually become published authors. And yet sometimes it seems like everyone is writing a book. Actually, I think more people who are financially independent than ever will write a book, which is pretty incredible. Matt Dahlia here, pictured, is the founder of a YouTube channel called Yes Theory, famously known for these three guys that got Will Smith to jump out of a helicopter, bungee cord out of a helicopter on his 50th birthday over the Grand Canyon. And he wanted to talk about his life, so he wrote a book. Great. Jada Selner was a mom at a playground, and with another mom founded something called Simple Green Smoothies. Went from 0 followers to 400,000 followers on Instagram in less than a year, published a best-selling book, and wrote another book, even though she never went to college, never had any formal training to be an author. Ali Abdaal was a Cambridge-educated doctor, and at 26 was doing his rounds and became a YouTuber. Amazing. And he wrote a book. Now, I keep thinking about this, and I'm a school principal seeing all these amazing people write books. I'm like, but who am I? What am I going to say? I'm not famous. At the time, I was a teacher sitting in a classroom grading papers thinking, is this my life? Retirement sounded so good then. But what I realized is that it's not just for famous people. And I really love them. Those are all my clients, and I appreciate them. Because after I did something really special, is I started teaching children how to become published authors in 2007. Every one of my 8th graders left my class published. So we changed everything. It wasn't a fraction of 1%, it was 100% of them became published. People started to come into my classroom asking, how do you do this? How do you get kids to write, let alone write books? I said I started treating them like they had something to say. That's when things started to shift. I started realizing the power of your own story. You didn't have to wait to someday, because that's what school had been for children. When you get done with this, get good grades, you can get good grades in high school, then you can get a good job, because you'll get in a good college, and we had to defer their entire intention in life until someday. But when I realized that you could do this now, things changed. Reluctant readers and reluctant writers became really excited. They would rush in, be working when I came in from lunch already without me. It was an incredible switch. We'd have fairs where we had other kids come from different classrooms to read their books. It was an incredible experience to watch the shift happen within somebody. And I started to think how incredible it is that kids saw themselves differently. They introduced themselves as authors. Even one kid, we talked about this, has said, I really want to go get a job, but I don't have any experience. I said, just take the application, write your name, and staple it to your book and say, I don't have any experience, but here's my first book. Let me know if you need somebody. Changed everything about the way they saw themselves. But the challenge was one day, we were doing this book fair. One of this really lovely student came up to me and was asking about my book. I was, did the teacher thing and said, well, it's not about me, it's about you. And however, that was a bold lie. And I said, no, I don't have one. And I just felt my heart sink because I had to be honest. And, honestly, they said, well, why not? I was going to lie again because I was like 2 lies in one day with the same kid. Not a good track record for a teacher. I just said, I don't think I'll have anything to say. And he said, well, why not? I said, well, I'm afraid it won't matter. I'm afraid that it won't be seen as good. He said, but you tell us not to be afraid and do it anyways, so you should do it. And the kid walked off. What? I never really thought about why I didn't write a book. I had been publishing books. I had people come from all over the world to visit my classroom to figure out, how are you getting kids to do this? And I said, kids, I'm not doing it. They're doing it. I'm just here. Obviously, I don't have a book. It's not me, it's them. But that changed everything for me because what I realized what it wasn't that I didn't have something to say, I did. What I had was this struggle of believing that what I had to say mattered. But Maya Angelou says there's no greater agony than an untold story inside of you, bearing that weight. If you've ever been told you should write a book, or you've ever thought you should write a book, and then you stuff it right back down, it will grow like this. It will start to fester. You start to give your attention to other things. Maybe you've started one. Like me, for 24 years before that kid said anything, I had started books and stopped. Well, that's not the right topic. Or I would get another idea. Well, this is a better idea. I need a good idea, right? I need a better idea. And then I would stop. I need more software. I need new software. That's it. I need a better pen. I need 6 more journals. The kind you could, never mind. You know what I mean. Any excuse I could find. But the truth was, I just was terrified that my peers might think I was stupid. Or worse, that no one would read it at all. And after that kid walked away from me, it could have been any of the students because he was right. I had always told them, you don't need to be afraid. The fear had surmounted so much that it took 24 years for that moment to happen. And then right after that, in 30 days, I finished the book that took 24 years and 30 days to write. I was so grateful. I had no idea what it would do to me because I only thought it was because they were kids they were changing. But it changed my life. It changed the way I saw myself. It changed the belief that maybe I do have something to say. Life isn't about just living it, it's about sharing who you are through it. Becoming an author changed so much in me that I began to tell people about this 24 years and 30 days. And they kept asking me, well, how did you do it in 30 days? Like, isn't a book hard? And I said, no, a book's not hard, it's terrifying. But fear is what I was missing out on. I was stuffing away the fear, putting it in there where Maya Angelou said, stuffed deep inside of me. That was the fear that was my problem, not that I couldn't write or didn't know how. Because what's a book besides one word after another? I know how to do that. But the belief is it's hard. How many of you would write a paper, even though you had 6 weeks the night before it was due? Okay. That's this thing, the fear thing. And finally you just turned it in. Here, good. And you became an editor of your own work, right? If you're an A student, you edited for the A rubric. If you're a middle-of-the-road student like me, you're like, I just hope I survive this class. Because I didn't realize I was dyslexic until I was a senior in college. So I had no idea why it was so hard for me. I just thought I was stupid. So if I can do it, I know anyone can. And the interesting thing is that you don't have to know anything more about writing than you already know. Case in point, I would go into a classroom, in a kindergarten classroom as a master teacher to show what writing was like for students. And in a kindergarten class, the teacher said, could you just model a lesson for me? I said, sure. I said, students, today we're going to write stories. And the teacher said, these are pre-writing students. Some of them know their name and they know a few letters, a few words, but they don't know how to write. I said, they'll be fine. And they had that paper, maybe some of you are old enough to remember that paper. It's kind of that weird buff color with the blue lines and those jumbo pencils. Yeah, so that was kind of where we're at. And I said, well, students, we're going to write stories. And they cheered. I was like, great, this is a good start. We then began to write. And I said, look, when you write, just write until you hear me ring the bell, and that's when you have to end. I said, are you ready? And they said, yes. I said, go. They started writing. Some kids would just make what they thought writing looked like. Other kids were like, took forever. And other kids were drawing pictures. And at the end, I said, time. And I went up to this young boy named Johnny. I said, Johnny, what's your story about? And he was one of those kids with just scribbles that looked like writing. And he went on to tell me, well, this is a story about an ant. I said, oh, okay, tell me more. He's like, well, this ant kind of has a way of getting in trouble. And he was supposed to go home, but he didn't go straight home after school. I said, wow. Okay, what else? Well, then his mom was worried, so she went looking for him in a tree. Oh, okay. But she's an elephant. Oh, his mom's an elephant. Oh, yeah, keep going. She goes, so mom's stuck in the tree. The ant's, looking for mom now, and went on to tell this beautiful story with a character arc, a moral, a lesson, and then it was just scribbles. And I was like, yeah, and that's my story. Amazing. The teacher looked at me like, wow. The incredible thing is you already have what you need to tell your story. Somewhere along the line, someone convinced you weren't good at this, that you weren't good at storytelling. But I want to convince you, you have it in you. It's hardwired in our makeup as humans. That's how we pass down things about our family, about our culture, about our lives, is story. Story is how we do anything, right? Think about how many stories you tell yourself every day. You make up stories about your neighbor. Oh, there they are. Never met them, but you know everything about them, right? We're great at storytelling. So it's not that we don't have the skill. We have something deep inside of us that makes us afraid that maybe we won't be enough. Because in school, we weren't trained to be writers. We were trained to be editors, right? You were given an assignment. Here's your assignment. You're like, great. What's the grade? I know what kind of student I am, and I edited towards that end. Same thing in high school and college. We were trained to be editors. Punctuation, grammar, all of that. We were never trained to say something that mattered, that we cared about, that we believed in, that might possibly change the world. So I just decided to flip that on its head and train kids to be authors. So they had something to say already. I already knew they did. And let them learn to be an author. And that's what I think each and every one of you who has it in your heart to write a book should do. Don't be like me and wait 24 years. Stand up for what you believe in, because your story matters more than you know. Many people think, well, I don't know if I have anything to say that's like all those really big, fancy people with YouTubes and big businesses, like they have something to say, but what am I going to say? When I was a kid, I was given a science kit, and it had a microscope and a magnifying glass, and in the 70s, the magnifying glass was actually glass, and I would go outside and you could see things up close, which was really amazing. But the thing I really got excited about was when you held it just the right distance from a dry leaf, it would ignite, to my mom's chagrin, and my friend, whose leg I would burn. or a few ants, which I know I owe karma for. But the lesson that I take now from that is that in this way that we look at the lens that basically focuses the light. If you think about the light, it's sunshine, right? Normally you just put your hand out, it will warm the palm of your hand. But if I took that magnifying glass, it would amplify and ignite and burn. Too many people worry about content. We don't need more information. We're drowning in it. You can't go anywhere without having someone try to program you about information. And with the invention of, or the advent of growing AI, there's so much information that we're thinking that, well, I'll just have AI write my book, which is great. But guess what? It's just more content. Content isn't the thing that you need. Content is the thing that everyone has. But the thing you need to have is perspective. Why you? Why were you the one chosen to bring this message? Because you are the lens that bends the light. Don't worry about what the content is. Don't worry about if somebody else wrote a book about that. Write from your deepest place of knowing. And if you focus more on who you are in the world, what you shine through that light will bend and ignite for somebody. Somebody specific. Somebody who needs to hear it from you. Because it's the way you say it. It's how you perceive the world that will really change the way they understand things. And I don't want you to ever think that somehow all those people you see that have New York Times bestselling author are somehow magically better than you. They're not. Sure, they might have accomplished things. Sure, they might have a perspective, but so do you. One of the disillusioning things I learned as I became a book coach is that 65 to 70% of the New York Times lists are written by ghostwriters. You know, the ones you buy and you put by your bedside but you haven't really read? Those. And why do you think they're all so similar? Because a lot of people in the publishing industry see books as products to sell to you. So you could put by your bedstand and take a picture and talk about it. Not so much that you would read it and change your life. That's not their thing. It's a product to them. The book for me changed my life because it changed the way I saw myself. That book, even though I didn't sell 1 million copies, it didn't hit New York Times, it did hit number 1 on Amazon for a little bit, and I was excited about that. But what was really cool is people started to see me different the way I was seeing myself differently. Because of that, somebody reached out to me and said, hey, would you be interested in talking on a TEDx stage? And I said, me? Yeah, you. Okay, what do I talk about? They're like, I don't know, you're an author. Talk about whatever you want. Whatever I want? And then I had to start believing I had something to say. And I just got up like here and did a talk. I'm honestly thrilled to be here, but I'm also terrified because I was like, if you looked at my balance sheet, you would be like, oh my gosh, we need to get triaged. He needs bleeding every which way. I'm the least likely person to be at this conference to talk to you about that. But I know that the value that it's brought my life is really incredible. Going on that TEDx stage, I had a new confidence because I said, I do have something to say. Not because I'm famous, not because I'm smart, but because I learned a lot more about my own perspective that matters. I went to do a TED Talk about what makes a good teacher great because I've learned so much from my students. And that TED Talk went to have like 4.2 million views. What? Me? The teacher that was reluctant to put a book out on the table because he wouldn't write one? Me? Incredible. And all those writers that started to come to me because I was helping them find a message within them that they couldn't find on their own. And I'm proud to see my New York Times bestselling authors write it themselves because the truth was, I told them, you have to change more than you expect your readers to. Because if you don't change, how do you expect them to have some sort of shift in their life just because you told them stuff about what you know? And I made them dig deep into who they really are. And writing a book is more terrifying than anything that many of those people had ever done. And it's a huge investment to be able to write a book. But I'll tell you that the biggest regret of your life will be not what you did, but what you didn't do. I'm really excited because my regret has finally gone because of that student. because I thought maybe I would never do it. Maybe it would never matter. You don't want to live your life doing all the things to be free financially and let the story you would have told die within you. Doesn't matter if it's a novel, a short story, a poem, but it can really change your life. And I've seen people who thought their book wouldn't matter much sell hundreds of thousands of copies of their book going, me? That's how I felt, me? Yeah, because they really wrote something that focused the light and changed people's lives. Not because they had a huge following on YouTube necessarily, but because they cared so much about it. Because wealth isn't just measured by the zeros or numbers on a spreadsheet, right? You can start compounding the impact your life has now. I had a student come to me who had been really challenged. In the school that I worked at, it was really innovative. You can imagine how different it was having these kids publish books. It's like when you try to tell me about the curriculum, I'm like, I don't know, my kids are publishing. I'm sure they'll do fine on the tests. I realized that these kids were going to have something that would last their whole rest of their lives. And I got a postcard at the end of school year last year from a student. He had a lot of difficulties. He had a one-on-one aide in the class, couldn't really type. They gave him adjusted assignments. And because I never taught from the chalkboard or anything, I just began the first day, we're writing. Let's get going. And books were the very first thing we started on day one. He said, I want to write, but I don't want to write a book. I was like, oh, crap. Most kids never say that. He said, I want to write a movie. I was like, oh, all right. Okay. Well, why don't you go figure out what it is? What does that mean? What do you have to learn? Came back with a whole report of everything he needed to learn, his structure. I said, great. Why don't you get to work? He wrote a script. He turned it in. He shared it. We published some things about it. And even though they weren't even suspecting him to graduate high school, he not only graduated high school, he went on to college. He went to Columbia. And then he went to get his master's degree in filmmaking and screenwriting at NYU, and he had sent me a letter saying, thank you for believing in me and telling me that I was an author. I said, oh, I didn't tell myself that, you did. That's the power. I mean, these kids that I was teaching are now turning into their 40s, so it's so weird. But it's amazing to see how much writing can change the life of anyone who chooses it. I had one woman who come to me who said, you know, I'm retired. I don't need to make a living anymore, but I really want to write a book. I said, great, tell me why you want to write a book. She said, well, I grew up in India, and I had a difficult young life that my children don't know anything about. And when I left India to get away from the challenge, I went to get my advanced doctorate in America, and I had to leave my kids with family, and eventually I was able to bring them over, but I think it really kind of ruined our relationship, and it's kind of estranged. And I want to tell my story, finally, so they understand me. I said, wow, okay. So we did. She's like, I'm nervous, I don't really write, I don't know if I can do this. And I said, you can do this. If Johnny the kindergartner can do it, you could do it. So she did. She wrote the story about her life. She was still nervous. She put it under a pen name, but she gave it to her kids. And it was incredible to see how proud she was. About a year later, I got an email, what I thought was from her, but it was from her daughter. It said, hey, this is not Sadie, this is her daughter. I just want to let you know that my mom's cancer came back and she died. Wow, I'm so sorry. She was such a dear friend. She said, but I wanted to let you know that you fulfilled the lifelong dream for my mom to become a published author. But more importantly, that book reconnected us, and we got to spend the last year of our life together. And I want you to think about the power that a book has, not because it's an investment that, see how much passive income you can make, because you can. Just keep writing books, you'll keep making income over time, just like anything else. But what's more important is What book will leave a legacy behind for you, or for the people in your life, or for the story that you've stuffed away? That 50 years after you're gone, people might pick that book up and know why you even existed on this planet. And I hope that you take the courage, if you have it in you, to write. And I hope that you believe you're capable and that you should. And I'm so grateful I get to live my life helping authors. That student gave me the chance because people started coming to me asking, could you help me? And because of the kids, I knew I could. And as I told you, people call me many names. Book whisperer, book doula. Well, I thought that was an interesting one. Push! No. Book wizard, book therapist, because I make them look inside. And I'm able to go from being a teacher, a principal in a classroom, to running a company with my husband and partner called Authors Who Lead, because I really wanted to help people. And for the last 7.5 years, I've run a podcast talking about writing and interviewing authors from all over the world, which was a dream for a kid that could barely read at 3rd grade. So if you have a book in your heart, I hope that you will write it. Thank you.